wanted to get the real deal with the speakers. So we spoke to them yesterday. You will not read this in their profiles because we dug it out for you. As he was leaving for the night from yesterday's inauguration session, he was tired. I could see that he was surrounded by people who wanted a picture with him. When I went up to him, I was hesitant if he would oblige me for an interview, but he did. I wanted to know what keeps him going on to conquer mountains, and he simply said, because it lifts my spirits. He has come to Nepal for almost 60 to 70 times now, and I asked him why. He said the most important factor are the people of the mountains. Simple, smiling, and welcoming.
Well, he's none other than Mr. Doc Scott, and he's also a world-renowned English mountaineer. He started climbing at the age of 12. He is world-recognized as the first Briton to climb Everest on 24 September of 1975. He has almost made his ascent to the southwest face of Everest, and he has done 45 expeditions to the high mountains of Asia. He has reached the highest peak on all 7 continents, the 7 summits. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on stage Mr. Doc Scott with the topic, The Lure of the Himalayas.
Well, thank you both, and good morning, everyone. My brief is to discuss the lure of the Himalaya, and I have been lured here many times, really as much for the mountains as to be with the mountain people. And I suspect it's the mountain people, more and more, that brings visitors back more and more. There's just something so special about meeting the people in rural districts, high in the Himalaya, people who've got none of the amenities we all take for granted coming from the towns, and yet there they are, so hospitable, so welcoming, and so caring. It's sort of, it's quite challenging really, sort of a reminding factor of how we all can be if we aren't rushing around like mad things all the time. Actually, I came twice in 1972, Everest in the spring and Everest in the autumn. Failed both times, but what did occur then was the talk of the town was that it was Nepal's first tourism master plan being drafted, and it was all being announced in the local paper. So I was kind of there in the beginning of your tourism, and here we are today, with a long way from those distant times. But the first people to visit the Himalaya were bands of nomads during the archaic period, 40,000 years ago. Now, since I've only got half an hour, I think I better push on from there. And I'm always being told by my wife that less is more. So, despite all these notes, I'll crack on. Now, just like to say, there's hardly a Himalayan valley that hasn't had in residence nomads, but also sages, saints and holy men, seeking peace and quiet from madding crowds. The Mani walls are evidence of the devotion once practiced in the Himalaya, and also the holy caves, gompas and monasteries. Most of the caves seem to have been inhabited by Padmasambhava or Milarepa later. Everywhere I go there's caves dedicated to these 2 great saints, Buddhist saints. Did anyone know the Himalaya better than them? What great tour guides they would have made. And I'm sure those Buddhist saints would have agreed with William Blake, the English poet, who said, good things are done when men and mountains meet. This is not done jostling in the street. More about that later. It is a magical place, the Himalaya. Now I'm old and feeble, unable to climb Himalayan peaks. I still have an excuse to come out here, checking on Community Action Nepal's projects. I founded a charity about 30 years ago to kind of pay back the guys that helped me climb some 30 or 40 peaks here when they were asking me to help in their villages. And with a whole bunch of very keen trustees from Britain and volunteers from all over the country, we have put in about 50 odd projects. And I keep coming here with the trustees, some of whom are here in the audience, to make sure the money, our donations are being spent properly. So I still get above the tree line, and it is just amazing actually to go out above the tree line into that area where it's just rock and ice. There's a few straggling flowers. A big sigh. I'm back in this magic wonderland where the air is so sharp and clear, where the mountains are vibrant against the blue sky. And you just wonder why it's taking you so long to come back here. Back home, you soon forget. And it's no wonder to me, and all of us, I'm sure, that's been up there, that the Himalaya have been called the abode of the gods. The first Europeans to be lured here were in the 17th century. They were holy men too, but this time Jesuits. Definitely not there to commune with nature, as they found the Himalaya completely inhospitable, places of desolation and horror. They were seeking the legendary patriarch Prester John and the lost Christian kingdoms. That's a whole other story. But they were the first Europeans to penetrate the Himalaya. Then came the British from India, mainly trying to find ways to trade with Tibet and perhaps a backdoor into China. Warren Hastings, the Governor-General of India at the time, sent Bogle through Bhutan into the Chumbi Valley to Shigatse. They actually sent him with portaloads of potatoes to plant at every stage he went through. And those potatoes, of course, really took off. So, and now they're all over the place, all over the Himalaya. So the British haven't been entirely useless. Have introduced you all to potatoes. So. The British then started to come in ever-increasing numbers, explorers, cartographers, geologists, plant hunters, and the first Himalayan tourists who came just for the pleasure of being in the hills. No commercial reason, no scientific reason, just to be here for the sake of it. By then, let's say by 1856, as Ruskin put it, mountain gloom gave way to mountain glory. And the mountains after Wordsworth, Coleridge, Keats and those Lakeland poets were now appreciated aesthetically, if not romantically. And ever more British came out, and with a few Europeans as well, the Shaglates from Germany, Austria, to just be here in the Himalaya. Then came the Mountaineers. Since the Alps in Europe had all those, they climbed all the main summits, they'd taken all the main features, all the elegant buttresses, they climbed all the faces. So all the time now, after that, they were looking to the greater ranges where they could find new summits and new routes to do. The Caucasus and, of course, the Himalaya. Why new? Because new routes are where it's at. Why? Because there's more uncertainty as to the outcome when setting off where no one's been before. And that, of course, is the whole kind of underlying ethos of any adventure in business or anything. When you're not quite sure how this is going to work out, when you're on tenterhooks, when you're perhaps losing a night's sleep the night before the adventure. And And you know, there's still more peaks here in the Himalaya and Tibet, over 6,000 meters, that are unclimbed than have been climbed. So there's much to do in that regard. Everywhere across the Himalaya, except Everest, there's nothing much new to do there since the mountain was climbed long ago in 1953, and since then it's been traversed by the Americans, 63, that was the most fantastic thing ever done. The ridges were taken, the steeper buttresses, and then the faces. So there's nothing new really to do on Everest. So for serious mountaineers, it's kind of not important. But on every other mountain, it is important. There are important routes to do. As late as 1979, we found a new route to do on Kanchenjunga, making the third ascent in that year, and the first by the northwest. And all around Kanchenjunga, there's smaller peaks to be done. And all over Nepal in the west, friends of mine from UK go out there every year to climb a new peak in that region. In East Tibet, fantastic number of mountains that no one's ever even been to. So why I'm talking about this here is that I've often wondered why the Sherpa, such fantastic climbers, and given us all such pleasure in the mountains, haven't set out themselves as groups of their own people to look and source new routes to be done. Because they have that capacity, they have that strength and skill. But for some reason, they've never actually gone out, as far as I know, and done anything much that's absolutely new. They've been with Westerners and helped them climb something new, but they haven't themselves sat down and thought, use their imagination to think of something interesting to do that's never been done before. So I hope that, we've been talking about that in the Kathmandu guest house the other day, and we hope that situation might change as the local indigenous climbing scene starts to mature. Well, let's move on to the main sort of topics here. Mass tourism. The problem with mass tourism, it tends to destroy the very thing everyone signs up to experience. Mass tourism destroys the very thing we all sign up to experience. The tyranny of numbers. It really is a problem. No one goes to the popular areas of the Himalaya these days to find solitude. The Himalaya is no longer a place for peace, serenity, and spiritual renewal due to the constant distraction of fellow trekkers. It's now hard to make your trek a walking meditation at the height of the season. It really isn't. I mean, I was there with my wife, Trish, a few years ago going up to Frichi, and all the way tried to take the odd photograph of each other, and it was hard to do that without somebody walking into the picture or someone backing up behind patiently waiting, because it was a continuous stream of people. That was incredible to think how it used to be in 1972, how it's moved on. How to reverse the situation and return to this most beautiful and dramatic mountain landscape anywhere on the planet, to a place where the mountain people are not overwhelmed by the sheer number of visitors. And visitors are not so disappointed as my friend recently, this year, was trekking up there. He'd heard all about the wonderful sort of people up there. And he was so disappointed that he felt every tea house and lodge was just like a fast food joint where the owners just wanted you in and out as fast as possible. You know, something's getting lost here in this mass tourism. So is it wise to work out the carrying capacity of the Everest and other popular trails by gathering together a consortium of wise men and women from many disciplines with expertise in environmental impact, tourism, and with knowledge of local people, and then apply quotas? If so, how can this be done? How can this be achieved without causing offence to the visitor and not reduce the income of the local people? Well, that's something for you lot to work out. But there's one thing that's happening that's got to be dealt with. There's been so many insurance frauds committed over the last 10 years or more, centering on the demand for helicopters to evacuate trekkers for fraudulent reasons. Helicopter companies, agents and hospitals have grown rich at the expense of the insurance companies and ultimately the trekker. This is something that's has appeared many times in your newspapers, in our alpine journals, our magazines in the UK and all over Europe. Some French insurance companies, by the way, have already started to refuse to insure their nationals from travel in Nepal. Other countries are talking about it. We all remember how quiet it was during the Maoist insurgency, where various foreign officers in countries recommended non-travel to Nepal, too dangerous. So insurance companies wouldn't insure those nationals to come here. We all remember how quiet it was then. Basically, no insurance, no trekkers. I suppose, no problem. Continuing on this path will solve all problems of overcrowding and associated environmental issues. But I'm sure you'll be wanting to sort this one out, and I know steps are being taken. But yeah. Now Everest, another 8,000 meter summits. Pre-1986, only one expedition per season was allowed on any route. So it was wonderful in those days, with time and space to be there, communing with the mountain as well as with each other. You simply just had to wait. Like, I went to Everest, fantastic look, twice in 1972, but then, of course, I was really keen to get this route done on the southwest face. I just had to know all the secrets of that face, and beyond the point where we'd reached in 72. But I had to wait until 1975 autumn before there was another opening. I was quite happy to do that, as we all were. We were all quite happy to be patient and wait the time when the Nepalese announced that there was still a vacancy. So different today, where everybody wants it now. But so it's worth knowing that it is possible to wait. And it's especially good to have the mountain to yourself, or at least your route to yourself, when you're coming off the mountain. In fact, the best part of any climb is when you're off it. When you're off it. When you just off it, out of danger, at the bottom, in your tent, supping a mug of tea, and just lying there with you, feeling totally at peace with yourself as your strength returns, and feeling so clear-headed, with the internal dialogue, the chatter we have with ourselves all day and every day, it is kind of slowed down. And thoughts come in still, but lying there, they come in so slowly, you can pick the thought off. And with the recognition, that thought will evaporate, leaving quite a space between that thought and the next one that comes in. And it's in the space between thoughts, it's so peaceful. You seem to be more aware of all and everything then than usual. Of course, you don't have to risk your neck climbing mountains to get in that state. There's people here that know all about it, who are just sitting cross-legged in a quiet room. But that's one of the great things about the climb, when you're just off it. But not when there's 1,000 people milling about at the bottom at base camp. Or maybe you've been with 500 people on the climb itself, as it happening these days. Because we've all seen NIMS, recent images from Everest, where now the climber may be just one of thousands. No chance at all then to commune with the divine in nature or with one's inner self. But why should Everest be treated any differently to, say, Mont Blanc, the highest point in Europe, or the Matterhorn? We must respect the fact that Everest is the highest, a World Heritage Site, considered to be of outstanding universal value, and to many, the abode of the gods, and in particular, Miya Langsangma, the deity of the Sherpa community, who, if respected and if offerings are made, will bring health, wealth, and general prosperity to the whole area. I think I'll just put a few slides on to brighten up this otherwise dull speech. So I'll just take you to the top of the southwest face and a little bit beyond. Give you a break from my voice. No, I'll carry on talking about it. Let's see. Try that. So here we are. Our mission here was to go. That's good. Go up here, and let's go back. There we are. Yep. By the way, I wonder if anyone's ever thought what happened to Everest. Well, he's under this tombstone behind the gasworks in Hove, south of England. So, we all think we're indispensable, but the graveyards are full of people we thought were indispensable. And there's Everest's resting place. And here's a plan of the mountain. You can see the red route, that's where we want to go. And that's the way we went in the 72, but we're going to go a different way in 75. There's the original route to the right, and the North Ridge, the Chinese made on the left, and the American route in the middle there. Now, on the walk-in, we always called in at Tangbochi Monastery to get Rinpoche's blessing for a safe return, especially all the Sherpas. So we got on the face, and just a bit of a problem with this pointer. It's a bit... There we are. So this is what the top of the southwest face looks like. See some climbers here. And quite steep. And it was Paul Braithwaite and Tut Braithwaite and Nick Escort that got into through the rock band. That's the big thing through this. There they are, having come down for a rest. Just that trip was all on oxygen. You see Tut here, eyes glued to Nick, who's got a lighted cigarette as he's changing his oxygen bottle. And there's the lighted lamp as well. So they came down, and Dougal Haston himself here, here's Dougal, took off into the gully with Ang Ferber, very fine, brilliant Sherpa from Kumjong, who we saw last week, and he's there in 1975 carrying our tent and handling himself like a regular alpinist, because Dougal's crampons have come off. So he's helping Dougal up, and he's paying the rope out for me as I'm trying to find a place for Camp 6. He never got a chance to climb Everest that year, but he was there 2 years later on Everest with a Korean expedition above the Hillary Step when the Korean leader collapsed. Ang Ferber's, for him, 10 minutes from the summit. It would look really good on his CV if he'd gone there and got Everest on his CV. It would have helped him get jobs with the foreigners later. But he never thought about that. He just got his shoulder under the guy's arm, got him down the Hillary Step, slept out, and later, next day, got him safely to the South Col without frostbite. So that's the kind of guys we had working for us on these big expeditions in those days. In their prime, there's nothing a Sherpa can't do, and wouldn't do for you if the chips were down. So on those big trips, siege-style expeditions, we owe so much to those lads. So there we are, we've got Camp 6 up for the first time in 75, and now we're pressing on. Looking down from Camp 6, by the way, very exposed. There's Camp 2, 8,000 feet below. A lot of interest in what we're doing, and we're going, there's a step here to go through, on through deep snow, held us up. Didn't get to the south summit till 4 o'clock. That's amazing. Can you see my green arrow, green mark? Can you see it? Is that visible? Yeah? Can anyone hear me? Oh, good. Is that visible? Just. Is that better? There's the south summit. So we got there late, 4 o'clock, late for Everest. And being 4 o'clock, we stopped for afternoon tea. We had that here, got the stove out, melted snow. And then moved along the frontier ridge, which it is, between Tibet and Nepal. Significantly, Nepal all in the light, Tibet all in darkness. I shan't go on about that. I'm a bit sensitive these days. But here we are then, we've got to this point, and now we weren't the first, and neither was Ed Hillary. Ed Hillary was not the first to get to the South Summit. It was 2 days before, Charles Evans and Tom Badillin were there. Here's Tom. He's having a lecture from Charles, who's a doctor, actually a surgeon. And Charles is saying to Tom, whose oxygen set wasn't working, he was exhausted. And yet only a brief distance from the summit of Everest. Tom, if you want to see your wife and daughter again, we've got to turn back. And they did. And it's a good job they did. Because Tom only got to the South Col by the skin of his teeth. He was delirious, hallucinating, and he had to be helped down to the Lhotse face later. If they'd gone this extra distance from here to the summit, they both would have perished. But that's the sort of thing we have to instill. Agents should be instilling in all clients, that you don't push yourself into a position where you can't retreat. So many of the accidents that are happening aren't particularly to do with overcrowding, just silliness, just people being overwhelmed by their ambition. This was left to Ed Hillary and Sherpa Tenzing to come along. And it was Ed that actually led that step there, about 45 feet there. And he did it by laybacking against the winter snow, don't forget the springtime, against the winter snow for 40 odd feet with his boots on the rock. And it was an amazing performance, especially as the boots were quite big. There they are. Actually, nobody got frostbite on that trip, but they're not actually designed for delicate climbing. So for Ed to have led that in those conditions was pretty good. In fact, it was the hardest pitch on the whole climb, right there, just below the summit. And so this is Dougal and myself going the same way in the autumn, where the snow is all piled up on the Hillary step here. Ed would have been inside the chimney here. And now on to the final bit, to the summit. Very happy to be there, as you can imagine. And I'm stood exactly where Tenzing was in 1953, where he put offerings to Mio Salongma, offerings to his deity in the snow. Ed himself never instructed Tenzing on how to take photographs. He never carried a flag at Hillary. He was only there for the sake of it, just to do it. Not for national glory, not for self-glory. Didn't have any photos of him up there. And quite interesting thinking of those times and the way they looked at everything. So here's Dougal and myself on the summit, which was a unique experience in our lives. Just him and me, great nature in the raw, watching the clouds building up below us. Beautiful sunset. We were there from 6 o'clock till 7 at night, which is a bit late. But we did have this amazing experience. Feeling part of something much bigger than ourselves going on here. Part of great nature in the raw. No one in miles. Well, finally, when the sun went down, we thought we'd better go down. And we actually did sleep here. It was the highest bivouac anywhere at the time. It was quite an interesting experience, but I'll leave that one. And here, we survived that. Minus 45 it was, without sleeping bags and without oxygen. And as it turned out, without frostbite. And that actually widened the range of what and how I might climb in the future, assuming if you could sleep out up there, you could sleep out anywhere. So it was very significant to me, this climb, for that reason. And it was only by chance that it started to dawn on us that we'd made the first British ascent. Everyone talks about that. That's how we're known, Dougal and me. Of course, Dougal's now dead. But what was interesting for us was just making the first ascent of the route. There is competition in climbing amongst climbers, not to be better than anyone else, but for the route, which is quite different from competitive sports. It's hard to get over these concepts to people who don't climb. They only read about it from the media. They're only interested in numbers, yardsticks. So there's our team, big team though. After that, we all went off in smaller groups of 3s and 4s, doing it alpine style. But then a lot more of those lads wanted to climb. Chris, our leader, Chris Barnington, led the trip brilliantly, organised for Patemba, who was here in the audience, and Peter Borman to go off and make the next descent with Mick Burke and Martin Boyson following. There's Patemba on the summit. But unfortunately, Mick went on to the summit alone. Martin had gone back to Camp 6, and he was never seen again. He disappeared in a storm, clutching a camera, hoping to make the first cine for a TV programme back in Britain called Blue Peter. So we lost Mick Burke, who was a terrible bloke, great friend, raconteur type, heart and soul of the party gone. We think he probably fell down there, down the Kanchung face. So we all went back with this having happened, and timekeeping.
Housekeeping,
Oh, yeah. I'll move on. Yeah, so we got to know all the secrets of this face, and then went home. But things have changed since our day. As you know, this is not the one Min took. This is from about 6 years ago. So it's been going on some time, this. And what I'm going to say in the last few minutes of my talk here occurred some time back. So you can imagine now it's very hard to sort of commune with the mountain. There's no solitude for that kind of thing anymore. On these popular routes, go to the other side of the mountain, go on the east face, you won't find anybody. The mountain's it's still possible to go to Everest and find a quiet place on it. So, well, you know all about that. So there she is, Mount Chomolungma, as the Tibetans call her, and Sagarmatha here, Everest at home, singing the blues, wondering about all those people having to evacuate their waste. Thousands of people now on Everest every year. Big problem. I don't know what Tenzing would make of that. Dougal and Tenzing myself after the climb. So we did see Rinpoche in the monastery, and he was interested in that this famous face had been climbed, because about eight teams had tried it previous to us. Chris told him the story. Patemba there on the left, the blue shirt translated. After listening patiently, Rinpoche stood up and said, "So, in perfect English, you British, you've been to the top of Everest, and now you're back down here. What good has that been to anybody? What a waste of time that was." Which took the wind out of our sails. I was asked to respond and said, well, I felt quite good about it, really, Rinpoche. Having been there, I felt now at peace with myself. In fact, I could go back home and be a better human being for this. Be more compassionate. I feel more tolerant to everyone suddenly. But he wasn't at all impressed. I think he just thought it was a desecration of a holy place. But he's wrong in one respect. Ed, who, being first, was able to amass millions of pounds to help the Sherpa people with their schools, education and health, putting in Kundi Hospital, and later helping to build the Lukla airstrip, helping to help with tourism, the most fantastic income-generating schemes. So, there we are. I'm just going to finish off now with a few further observations. Why don't you sit down? Huh? Where are we? Yep. So, I guess, given the large number of people now being attracted to reaching Everest summit by this original route, and the increasing number of deaths, as I say, not all because of overcrowding, it seems inevitable that the number of permits will have to be limited after deciding the carrying capacity of Everest, as is done on Denali, or Mount McKinley, the highest peak in North America. But how to protect the mountain from the tyranny of numbers and at the same time accommodate those who have come to rely on Everest and other popular mountains for their income. Here are some suggestions from Sherpas, Western climbers, and others interested in this. Our charity CAN, Community Action Nepal, only helps where help has been asked for and where it's really needed. We're not donor-driven, telling villagers what we think they need. Similarly, I make these suggestions on behalf of friends in Nepal who have asked me to do so, since the commercialisation of Everest and other Himalayan peaks is largely unplanned and uncontrolled. And that's not coming from, I've been reading about that here. So consider making it a stipulation that a permit for Everest will only be given to those who have climbed at least one, if not two, other 7,000 metre plus summits, somewhere else in Nepal. And if not, at least return to checking on the client's competence to climb safely. Pre-86, we all had to bring a note from our Alpine club in each country saying that we were competent to climb. If there are no restrictions, then we have to allocate teams to certain days. Now, can you imagine the problems of that? Not all on the those that not all on the day most favourable. What are they going to be thinking? There's going to be even more squabbles at base camp. We do hear down the grapevine that actually fights break out on Everest these days. That people steal each other's oxygen. All sorts of things go on that are not compatible with good mountaineering. Anyway, so best thing is quotas rather than putting people on the mountain at different set times, because there's always going to be huge problems there. Refuse agents to operate on Everest who have previously been incompetent and have cut costs by employing inexperienced staff, which has placed clients and staff in danger, and have brought incompetent clients with little or no experience who push on when should turn back. Increased permit fee for the general well-being of the mountain and the people who live around it and work on it. To counterbalance the above, to use peak royalties to improve the working environment of the local guides by ensuring full insurance cover, but also setting up a welfare compensation board to cover accident and death, to ensure financial help to bereaved families, wives and children. Establish a fairly remunerated mountain rescue group from an elite corps of Sherpa and other local mountain guides on standby to assist with rescues. This same group could be employed to fix ropes at the beginning of each season and to remove them at the end of each season, as is done, but pay them a proper wage. To pay Sherpas and other guys for collecting, sorting, recycling rubbish and waste from off the mountain and glaciers, as a sort of regular thing, not just every now and again. If Everest hopefuls have to climb elsewhere in Nepal, then this will enable others in Nepal to benefit from high mountain tourism, and not just those in the shadow of Everest. It will spread a chance to benefit around Nepal. So in conclusion, is mountain tourism promotion compatible with enjoyment of high altitude tourism? There's so much else to discuss on this, including encouraging the dispersal of tourists to less visited areas and possibly at less visited times of the year. I've really enjoyed walking in the monsoon myself, as I often had to do to get to Everest for the right sort of window of opportunity in the weather. Walking through the rains and suddenly it's clear and it's all sparkling and rainbows. Don't write off monsoon travelling if the tracks are safe. There's work here for local mountain guides and Sirdars to explore new trekking routes, especially now it becomes more difficult to find treks away from new roads and jeep tracks. This is a real problem. A lot of trekkers now coming here walking along roads. There is also working capacity development in previously untrekked regions to enable local rural communities there to benefit from mountain tourism by inducting homestay and lodge owners, guides, etc., into the art of sustainable tourism and supporting them to tap into government funding. I'm sure you'll be talking about this later. There are many success stories in Nepal. You're leading the world with animal conservation, and in particular, a fantastic increase in the rhino population. what a wonderful thing this has been for the rest of the world to see how it's done. Vast areas of afforestation. Well, at one time, we all thought Nepal was going to end up a mountain desert. And how wonderful that you've managed to encourage all the trekkers and lodge owners and everybody to use fossil fuel and not to be cutting down the last of the mountain juniper. That's a success story, as is the very vastly improved literacy rate in the country, establishing and maintaining the peace following 10 years of the Maoist insurgency. That's been fantastic. And devolving power to grassroots level, which we're finding with our charity is really working for us. And how wonderful to start seeing some of the streets of Kathmandu free of litter and parts of Tamil free of traffic. It can be done. And with the renowned resilience and resourcefulness of the Nepalese people, I'm sure it will be done. So thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the keynote address. Now, I request Mr. Doug Scott to please remain on the dais. Mr. Doug Scott, please remain on the dais. I would like to request Mr. Deepak Raj Joshi, the CEO of Nepal Tourism Board, to hand over the token of appreciation to Mr. Doug Scott for all the lovely pictures.